You're tuned in to The Keetria Show and listening to SOB, Style of Business, the podcast with your host, Keetria. We aim to highlight the ongoing trek of entrepreneurs and business owners from around the globe, featuring stories that recount their struggles, experiences, and inevitable road to success and self-fulfillment. Welcome to SOB.
This podcast is being brought to you by my inspiring new book titled Courage is a Muscle, Using Heart to Power Your Entrepreneurial Dreams. You can grab your copy today on Amazon. Hey, what's up, y'all? Thanks for checking out another hot episode of SOB Style of Business, the podcast. This is your host, Keetria. And this week on the show, we have joining with us Lorenzo Alexander Chambers, who is the author of his debut novel titled Gypsy Woman. And I'm just starting to dig into this story and really get the gist of it. But it's a wonderful coming-of-age story about a crew of inner-city youth growing up in Brooklyn. So who else to have on the show? Somebody who is actually writing about these different scenarios and bringing something to the table I think everybody will be interested in hearing. So make sure you guys tune in for this episode. And in the meantime, let me hand it over to Lorenzo. Drop that introduction for us. Give us the goods. Give us a little bit about your background. And we will roll right forward from there.
So, hello. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm really excited to be here. I'm a writer. That's what I love to do. The artist side of me comes out and comes out to play. This is, as you mentioned, my first novel. I've written a couple of other books, nonfiction. My work, I earn my living through education. I'm a principal of an elementary school in Brooklyn. Finishing up my 14th year. And so I like to write. I like to inspire. I like to provoke thought. So, yeah.
Love it. That's wonderful. Yeah, and we definitely have to tie in that educational aspect of it. I know you guys are also going back and it's, a different model from what we're used to, but we definitely want to focus primarily, I guess, on just kind of talking about your writing career, because there's some great things that you're sharing within this book and different lessons and stories. So let's start by kind of getting into the overall storytelling, because this is like it's a unique story, but I think it kind of applies to like the family dynamics, especially in modern times, of what a lot of people or a lot of youth end up going through. So just give us a little bit about what inspired you to write Gypsy Woman.
Yeah. So in the introduction, there's a little piece that talks about, I tell this tale not so much to tell the tale of me, but to tell the tale of us. And the premise is that, the main character and his crew, it's specific to them, but this story could have been anyone's story, right? In any city, inner city in America, or anybody who, it's written from my perspective as a Black man, but at the end of the day, anyone who's grown up without positive male role models, and they're kind of left to fend for themselves on occasion, are going to, have some real grimy moments and experiences in their lives that no children should really experience at such a young age. And so it kind of impedes the development. And so I thought it was a unique story from the perspective that a lot of people don't hear this story, because oftentimes people who grow up with these experiences, they may feel embarrassed or shamed. And sometimes it can be crippling, right? And so the idea was I want to tell the story and from the perspective of, no matter your background and your upbringing, you can use it. You have to make a decision to use it as a springboard and not a crutch. And so, towards the end of the story, as it moves, the character evolves to understand that he has a verse to contribute to humanity. And we all have a verse to contribute to the poem of humanity. And so that was my inspiration, was to kind of share that story. And I think a lot of people are starting to relate to it.
Right. Yeah. I definitely found it interesting, because when the book opens up, especially with the different characters, the different young men, I should say, and I believe there's 5, like when you start kind of going through the different profiles and backgrounds, one of the things I found interesting was that everybody had a just completely different family dynamic. They were all good friends, but everybody kind of had their own little plot going within the family. And I think that most times a lot of people are, we definitely experience this. Like, as far as like the male role models, like you can look right now, just like you said, even right now you can look, and a lot of people don't want to talk about that. But what do you feel, like what type of pressures do you feel come from, growing up without a male role model? Because it's become such of a norm that, you know what I mean? Like I'm trying to explain it in a way to where you can really get the question. So I guess what I'm asking, do you understand?
Yeah. I think so there are a lot of levels to this book, right? In the sense that it's really addressing what's been termed lately as toxic masculinity, right? So where does that come from, and what do we do about it? How do we make shifts from that? And as you mentioned, it's interesting that because you would think 5 boys growing up, kind of engaging in some of similar behaviors, they had similar backgrounds, and they did, but there were a lot of nuances that are different. So some of the characters, their mother and fathers are in the house, right? So it's not just, the main character grows up in a household with just his mom. And so how does his mom take on the role of the male and the female figure? And then some of the guys who grew up in households that their fathers and mothers and fathers were intact, why did they make the decisions that they made? And so it's not necessarily being physically present. It's about what's the impact and what's the influence. So if your dad is in your house, but they're not really interacting with you, what does that mean? And subsequently, if you grow up in a household that doesn't have a male role model, but you're able to play some athletics and have some coaches and other people in your lives, what does that mean? And also the history, kind of going back to, part of the book talks about slavery and the effects of slavery, and is some of that toxic masculinity imprinted in our DNA? How do you fight through that?
Exactly. Like that's one of the things that I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that has kind of become more of a norm. Like it's kind of like it's almost expected that a young black male should do X, Y, and Z. Just because the male father figure, whoever, was not in the house. So it's kind of, it's, I don't know. I think this is one of those conversations where, you just gotta, I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah. So it's interesting because it's an uncomfortable conversation, right? In the sense of you gotta, and I don't know if I can curse. Can I curse?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you have at it.
So part of the idea is, hey, we have to own our shit at some point, right? And part of owning your shit is not using it as an excuse or a crutch to justify your behavior. It is to meet that behavior at its place of origin, understand why, and then we have to make some shifts. And that's the idea of the main character, Maximus. He grows to understand, I've had some hardships at an early age, but I also had some good life, right? And so, the book reflects on some of the good experiences. And then you kind of balance it out, but also you have to get back to the idea of what's our purpose for being here, right, on Earth. So no matter where you came from, you got to say, and especially as you grow into manhood, you have to say, no, I can use these experiences again as a springboard to find my contribution, whether it's in whatever field of human endeavor you choose to make. And so at the end of the day, the book moves from really being grimy to hopefully a place of hopefulness.
Exactly. And I almost get the feeling like, especially with Maximus, that his whole family foundation, especially, I think it kind of mentioned his grandmother, and I think maybe just kind of setting those expectations. So if you have somebody that is setting a certain set of expectations for you at an early age, I think that kind of helps to guide you as well, versus, you're just kind of out there in the hood and, hey, do this and do that and go to school, and the parent is not really there. And like some of these kids, when the mother is working 2-3 jobs and there's like 2 to 3 kids, you got to get to school, you got to, little brothers and sisters and things like that. That's difficult for a young teen to try to handle. So it's almost like you have to make sure that you are taking care of the self-image at home, making sure you're meeting the requirements of being the man if you don't have the male role model or the dad in the home. And then also you got to, if you're on the streets, when you're hanging out with your boys, you got to look a certain way. Because there's a turn where they start kind of talking about women and, meeting the young girls, especially with this being a coming of age story. I knew that would be a part of it, but it's kind of like two different sides of the coin. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly. Yeah. And it's the idea. So if you grow up in an environment where, the men, refer to women in a derogatory way, I know that there's a sense of inside, intuitively, it ain't right.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so at some point, the social pressures might lead you to kind of engage in that behavior, but at some point you have to make a decision, and again, you have to own your piece in it and become responsible enough to say, you know what, I know better. I'm going to do better. Right. That's where we have to be able to hold ourselves accountable. And it's not an excuse, right? We have to stop with the excuses. Like, I understand you had some bad times. I get it. But, you've had some good times. But at the end of the day, what are you going to do about it?
Right. That's the question. What will you do about it? And it's like, what happens when you never ask yourself the question?
Right. And so there's later in the book, as some of the main characters have grown from, childhood to manhood, there's a scene where two of the Maximus and one of the other guys, they sit down and they're saying, we grew up in some dysfunctional shit. Like it was dysfunctional. Like, that's what, let's name it. And that's the uncomfortability about the book that excites me, because I tell people, if you can get past the first few pages, and get into it and settle into being uncomfortable, you're going to realize that this is really, because the writing of the book was cathartic for me, to kind of go through this, to revisit some of those experiences and the decisions, and then being able to sit down as men and say, listen, the things that we experienced, they were dysfunctional. And now realizing that, let's do something better and be different. Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering about your whole writing process in this, because like I said, when you read it, guys, if you need to grab the book, like if you read Gypsy Woman, it just kind of takes you into a realistic setting of being there, and you kind of see Kahari and Darwin and the kid, like you see these guys talking. Like this could be somebody that you grew up with. It could be anybody. And one of the things I was wondering is like, okay, when you sat down to write this, like that, it sounds like something that you just kind of grew up and experienced. But like, did you have any times during your writing process that you were just like, man, I don't want to put like, this is too much. Like, did you ever feel like it was too much to put in because it was just so out of the box, or just kind of you thought it wasn't cool or something?
No, listen, that is a fundamental question that a lot of people ask, and so I say that it took me about 3 years to write the book, right? And it took that long for a couple of reasons. One is, the science and the art of writing the book. So the artist, we write when we feel like it, right? And that's when you get the writer's block, and then you don't feel like writing, and months can go by. But then the science part of being a writer is having the discipline to sit down and write even when you don't feel like it. So the last year, things kind of sped up because I became more disciplined, and I was committed to writing, 1,000 words a day. Oh, wow. And that's the discipline piece. But the feeling piece, another reason why it took so long is because I would write certain scenes and I would literally have to get up and move away because emotionally I was so invested, and it took me back to the scene. And that's the being uncomfortable with, wow, some of these things really happened. Some of them obviously, I expounded upon, but at the end of the day, it was rough. Yeah.
No, I'm telling you, when I was turning them pages, I was like, oh wow, it's, you almost wonder, like, is this, did he hold back any, or was this all of it, So it's definitely good to kind of hear that. I want to kind of get into, I know you got some other works and things like that you're working on, but have you, what type of impact do you think just kind of bringing, stories like these, things that we would, they're not even taboo, it's just things that we just kind of expect. So what do you think would be, I guess, good ways to kind of bring these conversations to the forefront? Because you have child abuse, you have domestic violence against women, you have all these things that are more focused, which are fine. I mean, those are definitely some, you got to be on top of that as well. But like, as far as men, because y'all, sometimes things are just not considered cool to talk about.
Right.
But
So I know it's interesting you say that, because I'm waiting for some men to read the book and say, hey man, you really kind of revealed some man stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but it has to get out there and be out there. So the target audience is men, right? Young boys, I would say high school age, and older, just because it's pretty graphic.
Yeah.
But I think, if you grew up in an inner city, Chicago, Boston, New York, LA, Houston, wherever, I think you need to look at these books. I think men need to talk to men. I think women do a great job, whether it's in book club or just when they're together, just really sharing, intimate stories and feelings. And so I'm hoping that men are going to read this book and say, hey, yeah, as men, we need to kind of, get together and have these conversations and again, own our part of this, but also understand that it doesn't have to define us. Yeah. And that it's just some things that happen to us and we responded. But then secondarily, I think anyone else outside of, young boys and men who are interested in this, like if you're a black woman or a white woman or anyone who's trying to understand toxic masculinity and where it might come from, how to get through it, and you want to be the fly on the wall, I think once they read that, I think people need to start talking about it. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, you're definitely right. And I definitely think that there's a difference between male, the toxic behaviors, black versus, white males. Like there's a whole different thing, a lot of different things involved when it comes to the culture. So, it's definitely a conversation that needs to be had. And another thing I wanted to mention, I wanted to ask you something about how do you feel about beliefs? Because one of the things that I know you just mentioned earlier was like, okay, this is something that you have to ask yourself, hey, I know it's not right, but you can take steps to change. So that's something that you have to pull within yourself. Nobody can make you change anything about what you believe or what you think. But like, as far as beliefs, because if you've been doing something for so long, like say for these guys, they started, middle school or stuff like that, and just kind of becoming adults and young men and growing beyond it. So when they get older, like, how difficult it is when you have a certain belief that you've had for so long, and then all of a sudden you realize, okay, there's some changes that need to be made. Do you ever think that it's ever too late? Like, at what point are you a lost cause? If I could say something like that, how can we change some of these self-limiting beliefs and some of these beliefs that have been embedded in us because that's what we've been taught for so long? It's hard to undo.
Yeah, that's heavy. I think that it's never a lost cause. I think people bloom, at their own time when they're supposed to. And so you could be, well into your 50s before you're making these changes. I mean, hopefully it doesn't take that long. But if, like you said, if the toxic masculinity or certain beliefs or lack of love or lack of getting hugs and encouragement, if that starts, at 7, 8, 9 years old, and it's continuing till, my mid-20s. So if it took 10 or 15 years to build up the calluses of that, then it would only be fair to think that it might take 10 or 15 years to undo that. So, but I think it's never a lost cause. But I think people have to be honest with themselves. Like people back in the day, they would say, you got to go in the woodshed and take a look at who you are. I've spent many years alone, I think people aren't alone enough to get to know who they are, and they don't want to look at themselves in the mirror to own their stuff. And being alone is different than being lonely. So I say that the road back to redemption of finding who you are, it has to start with some real self-reflection and honesty to say, yeah, that didn't work for me. And, the people that say that, what they say now is they say, well, how's that working for you?
Right.
So the person, whoever it is, man, woman, whoever your situation, growing up with these self-defeating beliefs, every now and then, I think you have to turn around and ask yourself, how's that working for you? And if it's not working for you, you have to make some decisions to do something different, or else you're going to continue to get the same result. So.
Right. Love that. Yep. No, that's definitely perfect advice and news we can all use.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's perfect.
And the book talks about the book that, you'll see Maximus have these life-changing moments where, so now it becomes, well, to kind of like back to your question, what is the catalyst, or what makes you change? Well, if you see, your friend get shot down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you see your father slap your mother, you need to make some decisions, right? So those are those come to Jesus moments, right?
Yeah. I tell you what, I mean, the thing is I guess one of the things that I always wonder is like, to me, it's unfortunate that sometimes for a lot of us, myself included, it takes for us to kind of hit the bottom, in order to kind of see,
right,
to see our way forward, to see up. And just the fact, like, he went through all of these, dramatic experience. I couldn't even imagine, but I just think that, like, it's always better if you are not having to experience, like, just a lot of dramatic situations, tragedy, in order to change your life. Because we see that, like, say, for instance, when there's a death in the family, now all of a sudden everybody is trying to repent and get their lives together, at the funeral service. But it's like, why do you think we are, and I know this might be a little bit off of what we're talking about, but why do you think we always have to kind of go through these life-changing situations in order to gain some type of clarity? And even when we do gain that clarity, sometimes it's just for a couple of months. Like, it's like, okay, it's like, how do we get it to stick? What are your thoughts on all that?
That's the key question. I think for me, discipline is one of the character traits. So I think we have to figure out, what are the skill sets, what are the character traits that people who have successful lives or peaceful lives or happy lives or good relationships, what are some of the skill sets that they have, right? And so for me, I think discipline is the number one skill set in terms of, and I define discipline as being able to do what you have to do even when you don't feel like doing it, right? Mm-hmm. So again, back to that question of, how's it working for you, right? And if it's not working for you, it becomes about what do you have the will and the discipline to do it, and then do you have the ability? Do you have the self-reflection? Do you have, and probably as equally as important as discipline, because that's like some individual traits. I think you have to have a support network around you, right? Yeah. I think you have to have that person in your life that says, nah, man, that was a bad decision, or you shouldn't, like, hold me accountable to my actions. And I think that a lot of times we have yes people around us who aren't going, they're going to co-sign the negativity. I think you need to surround yourself with people who are not going to co-sign, because that's real love. So yeah, I think that's key.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just sometimes you end up having to change your environment. So that's great stuff. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's talk about a couple of things before we wrap. I definitely want to get inside of your writing process. There's possibly some aspiring writers just trying to get a feel for, like, tell us a little bit about your process and how you work. Like, what's your ideal writing situation? Do you have to have coffee, or, give us a little bit of the fun stuff that really inspires you to sit down and knock out those 1,000 words?
Listen, since your last name is Chambers like mine, we need to do some research to see if there's any connection there.
Right.
I'm going to I be as transparent as possible. So my ideal writing, go back like to the old style writers, if you talk about Hemingway and some of the other guys, Baldwin, in my ideal life, I would be like living on an island somewhere, just lounging, having a glass of wine and just writing. And so even in New York, in my apartment, I try to be as relaxed as possible. So I like writing when I'm hit with inspiration. So a lot of times early in the morning I write, late at night I write. In the middle of the night, I might go into my phone and take notes, like verbal notes, so I remember what it is. But I try to be as relaxed as possible, and live in the moment and get lost in the writing. That the best part is when I'm writing and I've gotten so lost in it that I've lost track of time. And, I've just write. And so I tell people, because everyone, the proverbial, everybody has a book inside of them. And I believe that. I just think that people need to sit down and write and not worry about, obviously, the editing and the revisions, right? So there's the process is just get your ideas down on paper. So when I write, I just try to write as much as I can. And then eventually, you have to go back. So now you have your draft. Now you have to revise in terms of, should that go here? Should that go there? And then the editing process. But that's why I think writers, I have a professional editor, right? Because I think if you want to be a professional about the work, you have to have professionals around you. So I love to write. I don't write, sometimes I might not write for a month or two, but then sometimes I'm feverish about it. So.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you give yourself some space and room for the creativity to flow.
People need to be kind to themselves, because again, I know some people write and then they stop writing for a minute. It's okay, but come back to it. Write about what you know. Write about what you're passionate about. I think because that will keep you going as well, and hopefully have people again around you who hold you accountable. So I have people around me who say, like one of my boys, he's like, "Dude, when are you going to write your next book? Like, you need to write another book." Like, so that's nice. That's encouraging.
That's definitely that type of situation. Yeah, those are the ideal people that you definitely need to have. And all right, so before we get ready to close, Lorenzo, drop us a couple of words of encouragement, for anybody who is looking to launch out on their next venture, write their next book, or write their first book, or just any dream that they may have, dream or goal. A couple of words of encouragement.
Yeah. So I think, when I think about encouraging people, I think about what's been encouraging to me. And I think two powerful ideas that compel me to live my authentic life. One is having a sense of purpose of why you are here on earth, right? Everyone has a purpose. I think finding what that is in the context of contributing to the well-being of humanity, right? And so if what you're doing is advancing humanity in some positive way in your community, that's part of your purpose and your being. And then I think in having a sense of purpose, the idea is understanding that you have a verse to contribute to the poem of life in your community. So having a sense of self is the key to this, and truly believing that, being able to persevere through adversity is going to be a quality that will sustain you, and understand that it's an adventure and it's a journey, and it's not necessarily a destination. And I say, live your life.
Live your life. Yeah, that's important. Live your life. Your own life.
Yeah.
Perfect. Exactly. Lorenzo, let us know, where can we grab the book? We definitely need to know where we can grab the book, and also be sure to mention where we can find you online and social handles as well.
Awesome. So if you go on, the website is gypsywomannovel.com, all one word, gypsywomannovel.com is the website. You can get the book on the website. We also have some T-shirts and hats on the website. I think that would be awesome. Otherwise, you can go on Amazon, and you can Google or through Amazon. You can get the book at Gypsy Woman, Lorenzo Alexander Chambers.
Oh, wow. All right. Merch. Okay. That's good. My eyes got buck at that. I like new T-shirts and hats. All right. That's perfect, Lorenzo. Well, hey, we're going to have you back, because I know that there's more. I know you have some nonfiction works, and there's some other things. And plus, with you being in the educational system, I mean, maybe there's some different topics that we can discuss there as well with the changes and things like that. Oh my gosh, I'm just kind of all over the place. It's kind of early, so I need to get that caffeine or something going. But nevertheless,
that's right.
Lorenzo, definitely thankful to have you on the show. We appreciate your time and wish you best of luck. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thanks for hanging out with us here on SOB. We hope this episode has been resourceful. If you'd like to check out the latest articles or follow Keetria's website updates, just log on to Keetria.com or follow her on Twitter at KEETRIA.